from the rough sketch all the way to the full-blown painting. There's definitely more steps we could be taking from the beginning of the project that would improve our final product. Many artists struggle to take the vision that they see in their head and to bring it to life on the canvas. As artists, we want accurate results, and I find that it always boils down to just one thing: your outline. So today's video will be my step-by-step process of how I take that vision and I make it real. No more muddy paintings, no more unwanted pencil lines, no more wishing that your painting looked like what you drew in your sketchbook. I'm gonna show you a technique that will get you a perfect watercolor outline without fail, so you can optimize your paintings and get back to enjoying your creative process. So grab a pen and paper, because there's probably gonna be a few things you're gonna wanna write down. Now without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome in, everyone. To get started, you're gonna see me just sketching it out on a time lapse, and what this is me starting the rough sketch. So what I want you to do is take your phone or your tablet or your PC or whatever you use, get some reference photos together of whatever it is you're going to draw. Take a piece of sketch paper close enough to the size of the painting that you're going to do, and start the first layer of your outline. So what you're going to do is just slowly but surely start building your shapes and any defining features to your art piece that you would really like to highlight. And this first layer doesn't have to be super dark. I like to keep it kind of in the middle because I don't know how much I'm going to erase, how much I'm not going to erase. You're actually going to see me erase quite a bit because I'm just kind of making this up as I go, looking at a couple offset reference photos to make sure I've got like my composition right and everything. But for the most part, you're gonna see me really play around with this, making different hills here and different drips and splats there, and kind of guessing where I want stuff to go. And this is why we want to do it on the rough sketch. We don't want to do this on our watercolor paper. We don't want to start a sketch and then only end up erasing a ton and then still have those underlying lines on our watercolor paper. If you've been painting for a while, you know what I'm talking about. When you put down graphite on watercolor paper and try to erase it, like, it comes up but it's still there. And especially if you use paper like a cotton-based paper, it will leave an impression on that paper from the sharp lead of the pencil, and it will leave a divot in the paper, and it is noticeable. It doesn't matter how much paint you put in that little crack or crevice where that pencil went, it's still noticeable. So doing this gets all of that out of the way. You can make all of your mistakes here, try different things, and not have to pay for it later on your painting. I think the rough sketch is probably the most time-consuming part, is actually just getting it to look how you want it. And it's important to take your time here because the next stages will really decide for you what your final product is going to look like. can see me going in now with a darker pencil. So this is going to be stage 2, which is going to be your refining stage. And what I want you to focus on is building your contrast. So where are your shadows? Where are your highlights? Where are your details that you really want to stand out? Because this is the reference photo that we're going to be looking at while we're painting the painting on the watercolor paper. So definitely going in and taking my time to make sure that everything is going to look how I want it to look. Make sure you have your light going in the right direction. Make sure that any overcasting or undercasting shadows are really defined so you don't miss those later. And we really want to save all of the shading and all of the detailing for this stage on the rough sketch, because that will smudge like crazy. I don't know if you have ever gotten graphite like on your hand and smudged your watercolor paper. It doesn't matter like how much you erase, that paper has an underlining gray tone, and it doesn't matter how much paint you put on top of it, it still looks muddy. We want to get all of that out of the way here. And the same goes for your tracing paper. So in a little bit here, we're going to be pulling out the tracing paper. And before you do that, wash your hands. I don't know if you've been doing this for a while, but even if you've done it 1 or 2 times, you're gonna have artist hand. Meaning you're gonna be leaving little tiny little palm and pinky prints everywhere you go. Everything you touch is gonna get smudged with graphite. You're gonna get it on your door handle, you're gonna get it on your face, you're gonna get it on your little juice cup, you're gonna get it on everything. So please wash your hands before you grab your tracing paper, and then after you trace, wash them again before you put it on your watercolor paper, because trust me, tracing paper will definitely still pick up graphite that is on your sketch paper. And if you haven't yet, please do consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Leave a comment down below and let me know what you guys think. Your feedback means the world to me because I am doing this for you guys. I want to help you learn how to improve your art skills and teach you how to paint, so definitely let me know what you guys would like to see next down in the comments. Also note that after you're done with this stage, that doesn't necessarily mean that everything you put on here is going to get outlined. So for example, my runoff down here, I'll circle it for you, where I have all these drips and these splats kind of showing up. I'm not going to outline that. That's going to be watercolor, and I know it's going to be watercolor. I don't need a pencil mark there to define it. What I am concerned most about in an outline is the subject matter, the main subject matter. Anywhere that I'm gonna put watercolor or a splat just for effect, for background gradients, I'm not going to emphasize that in an outline, because that's where I have room to play in a painting. That's where you're gonna have fun mixing your paints and not really worrying too much about keeping it in the lines. The whole idea is for it to be a loose style painting, so just keep that in mind. Alright, now stage 3. So this is where I'm gonna go in with a black pit marker. I'm using the one by Faber-Castell. I wouldn't use a Sharpie, it's gonna bleed through and get on your other sketch paper, and why waste other good sketch paper? So, going in here with that marker, I am outlining the main subject. So of course the mushrooms, the little island that they're sitting on, a couple of the flowers, the waterfalls themselves, and the reflection in the water. I will not outline any of the drips or any of the splats. We're just gonna make funsies with those. The only thing in the reflection that I'm worried about is those 2 little mushrooms here down on the bottom. I'll circle those for you, because I do want them to kind of stand out in the water. I don't want them to be overkill, but I still want them there. Alright, now for the 4th stage, so this is where we are going to get out our tracing paper. Before you do that, wash your hands, and I'm gonna put this down, make sure it's about the same size, if not a little bit bigger than your sketch pad. And then I'm gonna tape this down on the top and on the bottom on the left hand side, so that way I can peel it up back and forth, so I can make sure that the outline is matched. Now, Normally you would just go in with pencil like I am here, however I underestimated the transparency of my tracing paper, so I ended up doing it twice, unfortunately for me, because I had to go in with a black marker to go on top of this because it was still hard to see on the backside of the tracing paper even though I had already gone over it with graphite. So just to play it safe, when you trace over the outline where we are right now, do it with a black marker. Because it's on the back side after we're done with this outline that you need to put down graphite, because then we're gonna flip it over again and then we're going to press on top of that marker, and then that graphite is going to transfer onto our watercolor paper. It might be a little confusing, but bear with me, it's gonna make sense. So now I'm picking up the tracing paper. And I'm flipping over my sketchbook and I'm putting it down. And see, I flipped it and I saw that I couldn't see it, right? So I flipped it and I saw how thin. I'm gonna slow it down so you guys can see. And I saw how hard it was to see the actual sketch on the underside of this. So right here, and it's like you can barely see it. You can barely see the actual outline, and I need to be able to see that because that's the outline I'm following for the graphite. It's the back side that's the most important because that's the pigment that's transferring onto the watercolor paper. So I'm gonna flip it back over again, and I'm gonna go over it with the black marker and redo it all again. Yes, very tedious, very tumultuous, takes a lot of focus, it can take a lot of effort, but it will be worth it. So I did an extra step in here that I didn't need to do. I should have just outlined it in marker, but I thought the graphite would work. So don't do what I did. Saved you a mistake there. And now we can see how sharp that outline is. If you notice, I'm not doing any striations in the mushroom, I'm not doing any shading, I'm not doing any detail, just the complete outline, like one you would see in a coloring book. Now I'm gonna flip it. Now it's much darker, so I can actually see what I'm doing. Now I'm going in with the graphite pencil, and this is where you're gonna want to use a thick lead, like an 8, well, at least a 6B to a 12, 13, 14B. The thicker and softer the lead, the easier the transfer process is going to be when we put this down on the watercolor paper. Also, what's nice about this process is because I get to see it from the reversed position, it allows me to see if it's in balance, if things are actually straight. Sometimes it's hard to tell if an artwork is off unless you flip it over, if you look at it from an upside down angle, or if you flip it like we have here, where you're seeing it from the inverted flip position. Alright, coming into a close now. I have that sketched on the back, right? So the outline is done. Now I'm going to actually pull out my watercolor paper, and you're going to see me take a yardstick, and I'm going to measure anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch. For this project, I'm doing 3/4 of an inch. These are my margins for my tape line. Now you're going to see me put down my tape. I am doing a 16 by 20 painting, so I'm going to measure those out, tape it down, use a card, seal it, to make sure I get any air bubbles out of there. And now I'm gonna line up where I actually want my outline. I'm gonna center it. I'm gonna put down 2 to 3 strips of tape on the left hand side, so that way I can go back and forth and you'll see me peel it up to make sure that the graphite is transferring onto the watercolor paper. So right now I'm just going over this with a harder lead pencil. I'd use something like an F or maybe like a 4H, something that's harder, so that way it can push down on that outline on the tracing paper, so that way it takes that pressure and transfers the graphite underneath of it onto that watercolor paper. And also remember, wash your hands before you do this step, because you can see the graphite that's smudged on my tracing paper. You will smudge it on your watercolor paper. All right, so there it is. We have the outline on the watercolor paper. So now it's not perfect, it's very light. That's what we want. We don't want lines to be super dug into our painting paper, all right? We want these to be able to lift up very naturally. So I'm actually going to go in with a light pencil, something anywhere from like a 2H to a 4H, definitely a lighter lead, and I'm going to just touch up any little spots where the transfer paper didn't quite put down pigment how I wanted it. This is just going to finalize the outline itself, and then after this, I'm gonna go over with a kneaded eraser and I'm gonna pick up any remaining graphite that's just extra, that's excess, that we don't want showing underneath our watercolor painting. Any little smudges that might happen, because they do happen here and there, but nowhere near as bad if you would have just drawn on your watercolor paper prior. Just a little rollover with the kneaded eraser, and there it is. There you have it. That is the outline. Again, I didn't do any drips or splats on here, just a bit of the reflection of the water here, because the rest of it I wanted to play with. No striations here in the mushrooms, not really any striations or circles or squigglies like for the detail in the moss or the grass, because I know what I'm gonna do with my paint to get that effect. I don't want extra graphite down there before I put my pigment down. I want to just have a reference photo to look at instead of trying to build paint on top of graphite that will just end up looking icky. And if you've made it to the end, thank you so much for your support. It means the world to me. It really does keep me going. If you guys do want to see this painting, it will be coming out right after this video is posted, and you can join me there for a full tutorial on how to paint these magic mushrooms. And I can't wait to see you guys until next time. Bye!